Joe is an ugly ninja, just kidding. Joe is former ninja who escaped from his clan and wants to live peacefully with his family. But his son and wife are victimized, so he awakens his overpowers ninja skill to avenge them. The story starts with a man who is anxiously riding a train. He gets off and runs like mad, but a group of people who know his secret catch up with him. They fill the area with smoke, and the man fights back with incredible skill, taking on several foes at once. The enemies throw blades at him, so he draws his own blade to defend himself. The enemies then switch to metal needles called senbon, but the man has amazing reflexes and catches them with his teeth, spitting them back at his attackers. However, the man is outnumbered and overpowered. He is captured when a device grabs his neck, and he is dragged by a fearsome man. The wicked man slams the man to the ground and finishes him off with his sword. The enemies use a gadget to verify that their target is dead, and they leave. Meanwhile, a farmer named Joe is having a good time on his farm and goes back home to work on his motorcycle. He plays a game with his young son, Kyle, who tries to surprise him, and he tells the boy that he can see behind him. Joe's wife, Sarah, comes in and is shocked by how dirty Joe's face is. Kyle says that his mask is like the ones that the Oni wear, but they are evil people. Joe cautions him that the Oni might mistake him for one of them, but Kyle is confident that his dad will protect him if they ever show up. Joe jokes that he doesn't know if he can beat these imaginary creatures, but Sarah says that she will handle them for Kyle. Joe teases that he needs to finish fixing his motorcycle quickly, in case Sarah needs his help against the Oni. Later, a news report says that the man from before was killed, and Sarah is worried that it might have been the Oni. Kyle agrees that it was them, but it's time for him to go to sleep. The boy bids his mom good night, and Joe tells him that his birthday is coming soon. With Kyle sound asleep, Joe carefully checks the security cameras around his house. Sarah is troubled by the way the man was killed and the fact that no one knows who he was. Joe tells her not to worry and assures her that they are safe in their isolated location. Sarah is especially afraid of someone called the Reaper, but Joe says that it can't be him since he always worked solo. The story continues with a scene of how careful Joe is about concealing their identity, as he erases their fingerprints from a doorknob. The happy family goes on with their tranquil life as usual, and Joe tries his best to be a good father, as he makes his son smile. One night, the news reports that another person was killed by a mysterious group. This is one of several deaths that have happened lately, so a big investigation is launched to find out what is going on. On Kyle's birthday, the loving family has a nice barbecue. They all laugh and sing songs, and Kyle blows out the candles on his favorite kind of birthday cake. Kyle opens a gift and finds a video game, and Joe gives him a new helmet too. Joe likes this one better than the scary Oni mask, so Kyle says that he is not a bad guy anymore, he is a hero. Sarah says that she just likes seeing his normal face. They are very happy, so they all say how much they love each other. That night, Joe gets out of bed, but he tells his wife to stay there calmly. Joe goes downstairs, where everything looks fine. Suddenly, something shows up in the window and Joe is attacked. The attackers break in, but Joe fights off many of them skillfully. His amazing skill lets him take one of their weapons, and he uses his sword to kill many of these men. While he is killing one guy, Joe hears his son scream for him. The alert Joe acts right away. He stops an attacker who tries to block him and totally crushes this guy. Joe runs to find his family as he grabs something, but another attacker shoots 2 metal needles through his neck. The stubborn Joe does not let that stop him, so he crawls up the stairs. The terrible pain is too much for him, and we see a strange figure outside. Joe finally gets to the 2nd floor, where he sees that many attackers have been killed. But then Joe is horrified when he sees Kyle and Sarah's dead bodies on the floor. Shock fills Joe's body, and the evil-looking guy says that Joe's wife fought well. This monster stabs his blade through her neck, making Joe very angry, but he is stabbed in the back. Joe pulls the attacker as he tries to get to his family, but his body is too hurt to keep going. The attackers see that someone must have called the police as they hear sirens in the distance. The story goes on with a scene of how the leader checks that Joe is dead, and they leave just before the police get there. The police get to the scene and are shocked to see the slaughtered family. Sometime later, Joe, who seemed to be dead, wakes up. His first thoughts are of his dead family, and he throws up from the intense emotion in his body. The next time Joe wakes up, he is in a hospital, and the nurse quickly calls for a doctor. Joe only says his wife's name, and he faints again. Joe finally wakes up, and a doctor tells him that he came back to life after the coroner had already said they were dead. Joe doesn't care, and just wants to know about his wife and son. Sadly, he is told that they are gone. Outside, we see that two people have come to see him. They are Mike and Emma, and they are from the FBI. They need help with their investigation, so they ask him some questions about who the attackers might have been. Joe doesn't say anything, but Mike can see that he is very angry. This is probably the worst time to be asking him questions, so Mike just gives him his card. Mike tells Emma that it's just a guess, but he thinks that Joe knows who the attackers are. He decides that they will watch him in turns, and Emma is first. As she watches Joe on the roof, Joe remembers a moment ago when he was taken to say goodbye to his family. The nurse saw that he couldn't move Joe anymore, and it was because Joe stopped the wheelchair. Joe was furious and couldn't stand to get any closer to his dead family's bodies. Back on the roof, memories of his wife and son fill his mind, and Joe starts to snarl in anger. His anger gets to its peak, and he reaches for his wrist again. This time, he pulls out a metal needle. Joe stabs himself with it, and it does something weird to his body. Then, Joe is attacked by some assassins. He is still very angry, so he goes crazy and kills many of the attackers. Joe shows amazing strength and skill as he somehow takes over the fight. But that's not all, as Joe does some kind of magic and turns his body into black smoke. This move is very powerful, as it lets him kill many assassins in one moment. The story follows with a scene of how Emma has no idea what's happening, but Joe doesn't explain anything and knocks her out. The furious Joe then keeps on attacking and rips apart many more attackers. There are a lot of them, and Joe oddly shoots a sword at the elevator. We then see why he did that, as he uses a pole to protect himself and pushes all the other assassins into the elevator. Even though Joe is greatly outnumbered, it is obvious that the assassins are stuck with him and not the other way around. Joe stands over all their bodies as he gets to another floor, and he scares any other enemies. Mike wonders why Emma is not answering his call and is stunned when he sees many bodies. Joe is done nearby, and he meets the assassin leader. Memories come back to Joe's mind, so he attacks the leader with rage. This leader is clearly different from the others, as he fights well and even manages to put a device around Joe's neck. Joe quickly gets free, but the fight is still even. Joe finally uses his shadow skill again, and it lets him hit a powerful attack. Joe quickly does more hits, and the fight is over soon. Joe wants to know how they found him and his family, and how they knew it was him. The leader says with a sneer that Joe can change his look as much as he wants, but he will never get away from his destiny. Joe then surprises this guy and takes off his disguise. Joe doesn't say anything from here and just kills the leader. Joe then goes to see his family. He can barely stand to look, and he falls to his knees. Later, Joe goes back home and makes a hole in a wall. He takes out a box he had hidden, and we see that it has some things, including a mask. Joe looks at a picture that fills his mind with memories of his family again. We see his family home one last time before Joe sets it on fire. Joe watches as his once happy and calm life burns away, and he puts on the mask. The fire destroys every memory, but we see that Joe is still angry. The story continues with an explanation of a clan that has a secret technique, but the members of the clan are not allowed to share it with anyone else, no matter what. They serve the country of Japan. At one point, terrorist attacks become more severe and shake the world. Because of that, they leave Japan's jurisdiction and move to a stronger authority. They claim that this is for the sake of Japan's future. Anyone who opposes this decision will be eliminated. Then the scene shifts to show a man who finds his wife dead, but his son named Heigen is still alive, and it turns out that this is a dream of our MC, a widower who wants revenge. He is seen holding an ugly, disgusting ninja captive, who he had previously defeated. He is hung upside down on a rope. But suddenly, the widower faints. There is someone who calls the widower by the name Heigen. This weird old man is annoyed because he always meets Heigen in a dying condition. The weird old man asks why he doesn't use his disguise mode. The widower says that they managed to break through their masking system. The old man is surprised because he always meets him in a battered state. He asks if Heigen uses the secret technique, real consciousness. He advises Huygen not to use that technique again because it will take his life. The old man is shocked when he sees the wound on Huygen's back. He should have died from that wound. He thinks that it is either luck or maybe someone wants him to stay alive. The weird old man is a doctor. He says that even though Huygen is overpowering, healing still takes 5 to 6 days. After that, Huygen intends to hunt them all down by himself. Sometime later, the unfortunate widower wakes up alone without anyone accompanying him. He looks impatient to avenge himself. As he opened his bag, he remembered the business card that the FBI agent gave him at the hospital. Then Huygen went out and taught a lesson to the ugly, disgusting ninja. The ninja said that it was nothing to him. He was so strong, he didn't know if he was human or alien. Huygen kept beating him until morning, but the ugly ninja was still alive and laughed, saying that at that time, Huygen's wife was full of anger and hatred until the end of her life. Besides being ugly, this ninja was really a psychopath. Unable to bear the words of the ugly ninja, Huygen sent him to hell by using a lighter and burning the floor below him. The poor widower was consumed by revenge, and instantly the fire blazed and turned him into ashes. Meanwhile, at the FBI office, Mike was angry because he was kicked out of the investigation on the case that Joe experienced. The boss said that they couldn't do anything because they didn't know who the perpetrator was, and this was an order from their superiors. They were ordered to stop investigating the case, or they would be fired. Mike said that Emma had seen the incident when Joe was attacked by a group of assassins, but the senior told Mike to check again with Emma. Strangely, the red-haired girl also didn't want to continue the case, because they all seemed to be trying very hard to cover it all up, and there must be a mystery why they were trying to cover it up. So Emma chose to be relaxed. She then showed that Joe, Sarah, and Kyle, who had died, were aliases. Those names were not their real names, just like the previous victims. Mike, the black-bearded man, was confused by what was happening, and from here we know that Huygen is Joe's real name. Meanwhile, Huygen, who was packing, noticed a jewelry given by a woman. He then hurried to ride his old motorcycle to hunt down the perpetrators who killed his family. He searched everywhere, but he seemed to find no clues. He was annoyed until he rested at a bar. There, he saw the police acting like thugs. The fat cop then ordered Huygen to show his driver's license because he suspected that Huygen's motorcycle was stolen. Huygen ignored the fat cop, which made him angry. But with just one attack, the fat cop fell down with pleasure. The skinny cop then tried to defend his useless fat friend, but without touching him, Huygen could make the skinny cop fly. The old guard looked happy but sad because his bar was a mess. Feeling desperate, Huygen decided to contact Mike. Meanwhile, Mike scolded Emma, who was busy playing VR. In this era, technology was developing rapidly, thanks to a company named Euza. Mike then got a phone call from an unknown person who was definitely Huygen. Mike was shocked and immediately ordered Emma to track Huygen's location. Mike asked who Joe really was, because Joe Logan was a fake name. Suddenly, the poor widower smashed his phone, cutting off the signal. But Huygen called back and said this was Mike's last chance. Mike asked what he had to do. Huygen wanted them to meet somewhere, and Mike would choose the location. Mike then invited Huygen to meet at a Chinese restaurant. Meanwhile, Emma failed to track Huygen's location. The widower was very clever. After that, Huygen went to the place. On the way, we saw an advertisement for a technology company named Euza. They made all kinds of technology, from cradles to graves. Huygen went to the rooftop and observed the situation there. Meanwhile, Mike had been waiting for Huygen at the Chinese restaurant with its very talkative owner. Huygen then entered and quickly approached Mike's seat. Mike thought Huygen had died falling from the roof. As proof, Mike asked to see Huygen's face, but Huygen only showed Mike's business card. Mike was not satisfied with that. Huygen walked to the door until Mike stopped him. Then, Huygen seriously asked about a clue to the incident that befell his family. Mike would give it to him if Huygen was willing to cooperate. Huygen agreed, but Mike foolishly confidently pointed a gun at Huygen because he didn't want to work with him. Mike forced Huygen to tell the incident on the hospital roof at that time. But suddenly, an Euza Eats courier came to pick up the order. Mike continued his question, but another Euza Eats courier came again. Mike then approached Huygen to hold him, but someone came in. Mike thought he was an Euza Eats courier and told him to leave. Unexpectedly, the man quickly attacked them. Luckily, Huygen was able to fend off his attack. The man used 2 sword weapons. Mike still tried to make himself useful even though he was a burden. Huygen unleashed his shadow technique that took the form of the god Ashura. Huygen fought the ninja like Zoro in Ashura mode. But the ninja apparently brought a friend, but they were just dust for our widower, until they both were knocked down and went to hell. Mike was surprised to see Huygen's ability, then asked again who he really was. He answered Peking Duck. What the heck? Mike asked where the real Joe was, then Huygen showed his Joe mask. Huygen admitted that he was a ninja, just like the ones who attacked him. Mike, the noob, was shocked and half scared to hear that. He seemed to pee in his pants. And suddenly they were showered with bullets from outside the cafe by mysterious people. In a matter of seconds, Huygen had disappeared and he was on the rooftop. Mike was amazed to see the ninja's weapon that managed to injure his armor. He thought that their technology couldn't possibly make that weapon. Then Mike and Huygen looked at the Auza ad in front of them. Does this have anything to do with Auza? Meanwhile, somewhere, someone named Zai reported that Huygen was still alive. Meanwhile, in the middle of nowhere, a crowd of people were seen dreaming of heaven so intensely that their blood splattered onto a 10th-rate Statue of Liberty knockoff. A useless bald man was seen terrified, pleading to God to stop the devil. But God didn't grant his prayer. A pair of giant hands attacked them until their car crashed and exploded. There was an ugly, disgusting man licking a cell phone-flavored ice cream. He said the woman in the photo was quite a catch. He then went to the ninja headquarters that looked more like a haunted house. The ugly man felt his job was very boring if he had to deal with those minions seriously. He spoke to a man in front of him named Master Yamaji. Yamaji informed him that a sword is a weapon without instinct. But according to this ugly dwarf, his way of picking up was outdated. Adhering to oaths or codes of ethics was not their style. He wondered if Yamaji was still smitten with that woman. For Yamaji, outcasts are no longer considered ninjas, but enemies to prevent the secret ninja techniques from being exposed. They all had to be eliminated. Higan was one of the elite ninjas with many fighting techniques in Japanese history. He was the most ferocious ninja among the ninjas. Although they had killed him before, he came back. According to them, Huygen used a forbidden technique that could only be used by senior ninjas. To find out, they had to be able to send him to hell, and they were preparing it. There was another way, according to the dwarf, that could make Huygen beg for mercy and then kick his butt. He remembered someone who could be relied on, the Angel of Death. Meanwhile, in a warehouse, a man in a white mask told Zai, the Angel of Death, that Zai had sent many of his former colleagues to hell. The ninja organization is now very corrupt. The only reason Zai is still hunting rogue ninjas is because he fears the organization. After all, they are just ninjas fighting to maintain their dignity. And that's why Zai failed to send Huygen to hell. Huygen has proven that ninjas with ancient beliefs will not lose to people like Zai. The rogue ninjas will not be afraid after knowing this. He will tell Zai, who taught him to use the sword. The man in the white mask then attacked Zai while reciting a poem. The swooping bird attack was so powerful. But Zai still held on and asked why he didn't avoid his secret technique again. Suddenly, he realized that Zai's sword was in his body. He surrendered and will wait for Zai in hell. Meanwhile, Master Yamaji has forbidden Zai to fight Huygen and does not intend to make them fight. At the FBI headquarters, Mike was angry because the case of the attack at the old man's shop had been closed. The FBI concluded that the shop was used for money laundering. This blonde man tried to calm Mike's emotions and told him to accept the decision. Mike suspected that the blonde man was ordered by the superiors to do this. Then the senior FBI called Mike for a chat, telling him to stay focused on the task without interfering in the case. He suggested that Mike better think about retiring peacefully while fishing and enjoying whiskey. But Mike doesn't like fishing and prefers sack. This made the senior intend to send him good whiskey products and a fishing rod. With a suspicious face, Mike asked if the fishing rod was made by Auza. The senior then left without answering Mike's question. He gave an envelope containing a retirement letter for Mike. Meanwhile, somewhere, Huygen, who was making a sword, was reminded of his late wife and child whom he loved. His hands were shaking, then he took a breath as if he was about to do something serious. Not long after, Mike arrived there and was angry because Huygen had called him to a place that was as unclear as your future. Mike felt bad for the old man who owned the shop because he had been trapped with false accusations and they had to deal with it. Inside the warehouse, they discussed the weapon at the crime scene, made from a special alloy that only Aoza had. The ninja who attacked them seemed to have a connection with Aoza. Mike felt that Aoza was a dangerous company because it made the FBI silent. Mike washed his hands, even though he almost died in the previous incident. Huygen felt it was nothing because they had sent his family to heaven. He would avenge them. Mike told him that he intended to arrest Huygen after Huygen had successfully avenged his revenge. He then burned his resignation letter because he was determined to protect the citizens from the criminals. Besides, he also didn't like fishing. For years of working, Mike had never dealt with strange ninjas. Huygen then gave Mike a drink as a sign that their alliance had been formed. Mike didn't expect this, but he had to repay those jerks. After drinking, Mike was surprised because it was not sake, but an energy drink. This poor widower indeed has a strange taste. When they were talking about Aoza, suddenly the door opened and it turned out to be a Peking duck brought by Mike. In the evening, Mike was chatting with Emma, who was late to arrive there. It seems like Mike needs to teach Emma the definition of being late, but Emma didn't want to discuss it further because she had already gone to the trouble of coming here with her cool car. Mike wondered why Emma brought this trash. Suddenly, Emma pointed out that Mike's car was more fitting to be called trash. Then Huygen said that Emma's car was a vintage car made by the best designers in the 20th century. Emma was amazed to see Huygen, who understood so much about her old car. Huygen suddenly looked at Emma with a sharp gaze. Mike then told this useless ugly woman to shut up because they were going to discuss Aoza. Emma invited them to get into the car. She showed the very futuristic interior of the car. The car was a large computer that she assembled herself, and all information about Aoza had been collected in that old car. Aoza is a multinational company that has many technology products. Its global market share is also high, so there is no country in this world without Aoza support. But the growth of the company has raised many dark rumors, including journalists and organizations criticizing Aoza experiencing mysterious deaths. One of them is the case of an ugly bald man who died mysteriously. He was a European politician who refused a cooperation offer from the Aoza company. But now his successor is the opposite. He even attracts Aoza to enter the country. And all those dark rumors are suspected to be related to ninjas. Mike felt dizzy facing the nightmare that was happening. Meanwhile, in a laboratory, the CEO of Aoza was monitoring the development of reactor technology that could generate electricity in fantastic amounts. He is sure that this is the technology that will illuminate the future, and Aoza will be the only best company. The world will be flooded with Aoza technology products. After leaving the laboratory, Master Yamaji was waiting for him there. The CEO of Aoza did not expect Yamaji to come here directly. He then handed over a photo, and the CEO of Aoza said that it was a member of his team who was testing their latest weapon by making former ninjas as their experimental targets. And they still need a lot of data for that weapon. Yamaji suddenly stood up and said that Aoza should not do such a thing again. On the other hand, Emma explained that if they wanted to find out about their actions and the ninjas, then going to Aoza City would be a good first step. Surprisingly, Huygen pushed Mike, followed by a sword piercing Emma's junk car. Huygen then ordered Emma to immediately start her car. Meanwhile, the sword kept attacking relentlessly. With his inner eye, Huygen saw the position of the ninja attacking them, but stupidly, their junk car was hit by a truck. Huygen was the only one still conscious. He saw the ninja attacking them again, then he got out of the car and parried the ninja's attack. They crossed swords all the way to the rooftop of the building. The ninja quickly pulled out a magic rope weapon to attack Huygen, and Huygen once again turned into Ashura mode. It seems like he is a true fan of One Piece. That skill is very effective in making his enemies look like useless minions. The ninja fired a rocket from his mouth to attack Huygen, but this widower easily turned the situation around. He pulled out the device that was in the ninja's chest before dropping him down. Huygen was seen giving a signal to send to hell on that device, and the dwarf man smiled at that. Meanwhile, from afar, Huygen observed Mike and Emma, who were still unconscious because of the accident. Then suddenly, one of the cell phones belonging to the cell phone collector rang. From the cell phone, someone was heard saying that finally they could talk. Thanks for watching. If you're enjoying the series, Don't forget to leave a comment and like to support this channel. Love you guys.